Hello, my friend. My name is Byron, and I'm from the BJJ Brick Podcast. I want to thank you for checking out the podcast on the YouTube channel here. It's a weekly show dedicated to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and having fun on the mats. Enjoy the show.
Thank you for listening to the BJJ Brick Podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to flatten your Jiu-Jitsu learning curve, help you get the most out of your grappling ability, and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back, my friends, to the BJJ Brick Podcast. This is episode 238. Today we have an interview with Roy Harris. My name is Byron Jabara. I got Gary Hall and Joe Thomas, two guys who have just got done putting together an edible bouquet. Man, this thing is amazing. I didn't know these guys are so good with arranging bouquets, and they transformed this into the edible world. Gentlemen, very impressive.
Yeah, well, fruits and nuts.
Yeah, definitely fruits and nuts. And, I heard edible, and you wanted an edible bouquet. And, Joe was talking to me about it and, didn't give me any direction. And I just heard edible. And to me, first thing that came into my mind was edible underwear. So, there's edible underwear in this bouquet, too.
Yeah. Gary has been known to wear edible underwear for days. And I think it kind of becomes unedible at some time in that process.
Sometimes it adds a little flavor. It's like Tabasco.
Like how I said unedible instead of inedible.
Except
by the time jiu-jitsu class is over, let me tell you don't want anything to do with those underwear.
Yeah, well, we do have a great show this week. Quickly want to mention our audiobook. We've got a couple of them. One of them is your first year in BJJ. The other one is 6 BJJ training games. Games that are designed to help you get better, faster, develop your team and your unique game, and enjoy your time on the mat even more. These 6 games are pretty simple in concept, but can have groundbreaking results. It just gives you a different mode while you're rolling. So your training partners don't even need to participate in the game. Really, if they roll with you, you're good from there. Like the rest of it is in your court. That ball is in your court, right, Gary? After you decide which game you're going to play, it's going to limit your goals. You're not just going to try to sweep somebody or submit somebody. You have kind of a different goal, and it will dramatically change the way you're rolling and really open up some different doors and opportunities for you. You like how I threw in 2 idioms in the same thing, Gary?
You threw 2 idiots in there?
Hey, is he talking about us?
Yeah, I think we should take care of him, Joe.
Okay. You're local. I'll let you handle it.
Problem is, I can't. I need your backup.
I got my running shoes on. I'll be all right, I think.
Yep. So speaking of running shoes and surviving tough scenarios, that brings us to this week's off the mat lesson that we'll then try and relate to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So you guys know I started skating a little bit ago, and started out riding an old skateboard that my kids had laying out in the garage, and decided I needed to buy one that was right for myself. And so you look online, and there's a lot of different options out there, and I was unfamiliar with it, but I ended up with an 8.5-inch deck. It seemed like the right deck for me from everything I was reading, and I was comfortable on it, and skated it for a while, and it started to break down, and so I got a new deck, and then I bought an 8-inch deck. And we're talking about the width of the deck and the length and the wheelbase and everything is sort of proportional.
An 8-inch what?
Deck.
Okay, gotcha.
D-E-C-K. So I got a new skateboard. It was a 1/2 inch narrower, and I stood on it. I rode it around, and it just didn't feel right. And I rode it for a little while, and finally I decided to order a new skateboard deck, and I got an 8 3/8 inch deck. And if you put these decks side by side, you really couldn't tell the difference. I mean, it's 3/8 of an inch in width, and it on paper seems pretty insignificant. But as soon as I put that all my trucks and wheels on the new deck and got on it, it just felt so much better. And I was more comfortable. Could land some tricks. And so how this relates to jiu-jitsu, I went through a couple of boards, kind of upgraded. And if you think you're going to get to say, purple belt, maybe even brown belt with that $70 Fuji gi you bought first, you got another thing coming. You got to upgrade a little bit. And if you want to get the black belt, you got to spend the $250, $300 for a shoulder roll. No, that's not true at all. But what I took from this is that small details that are almost imperceptible. I mean, certainly a non-jiu-jitsu practitioner wouldn't even notice. Like if you switch from a cat paw grip on the sleeve to a grip up behind the elbow on the sleeve, a lot of people won't even notice. But sometimes changing just little details can transform your game, and especially if it's a gripping issue, it won't just change the particular technique that you're working on, but it might work its way into other positions, and you can make a big difference by just making small adjustments.
Yeah, and you know, according to Joe, 3/8 of an inch is a significant difference in some things. And
well, you didn't hear it from me, but
no. But you know, the big thing about that, like, you know, I've talked to Byron about this issue before, and like Joe said, you know, on 8 3/4 was comfortable. Byron, you know, he's comfortable up to 12 inches. So it's been comfortable for him, you know, to use 12 inches.
Yeah, and Gary, I'm not even a skateboarder. I don't know why I'm throwing myself under the bus like that. But yeah, the little details.
Yeah. Little details make the biggest difference. You know, I try to tell my wife that.
There you go. Well, you do tell her. She just doesn't listen.
What? You say something?
But that's interesting, Joe. And it could just be, you know, when you first start jiu-jitsu, you just grab, you know, it's a grip, I grab it. There's my grip. You know, grab the pants, there it is. And then at some point in time, you're past that stage and you're like, okay, how are you grabbing that? Or why can't I break that grip? And I think about judo, and I don't know hardly any. I mean, I know a very limited amount, but the grips and just the way they grab that collar, and sometimes they kind of roll it into their hands differently, or a slight different location on the collar makes a huge difference. And how tight their arm is. Sometimes it's tight, and sometimes like their arm has a ton of slack and it's loose, and that affects how you try to break the grip, because like you yank on it and it just absorbs that energy and it doesn't get dumped into the hand, into the grip. It's like, man, there's a lot of things going on with just a little tiny thing. Yeah, grab the collar. Okay, that's what you teach day one, but eventually you're learning a ton about these things. And of course, different collars, you grab them slightly different. You know, not all collars are equal. Not all skateboard decks are equal, Gary. And some of them are different widths and probably different lengths. I don't know.
Yeah, it's all proportional. But think about like one particular technique or a group of techniques in jiu-jitsu, that being the collar chokes. It seems like when you first learn them, it's like the deeper the grip, the better. That's almost like the golden rule, right? The deeper the grip, the better. And then you start to transition to like bow and arrow chokes and loop chokes. And sometimes you got to lower that grip a little bit. And, you know, an eighth of an inch can make a big difference. And I don't mean that. I didn't mean that to pile onto the jokes. It just, but really, just absolutely. Slightest adjustment to give yourself a little bit more room to transition. You know, like that bow and arrow choke, you need to be able to move to a 90-degree angle, so to speak, and sometimes you need to just adjust that grip a little bit. Or
sometimes with just, I mean, you might think, okay, an eighth of an inch, he's really not being serious about that. But sometimes an eighth of an inch difference and your wrists will bend opposed to stay strong. And if it's that eighth of an inch, or like on my guillotine chokes, an eighth of an inch has a huge difference in comfort, because where I'm grabbing your chin, I want my thumb right where it's at. I want my wrist right where it's at. And, you know, a little bit of a difference, it might work, but I really want it to be what I understand to be done correctly. I'm sure, you know, give me enough time and work with something, I'll see something else, and maybe it changes a little bit differently. But it does. It really matters, these small details. An eighth of an inch can be the difference between you getting your guard passed or not. If your toes, you know, as they're passing and throwing your legs beside, if your toes scrape their hip and you push them out a little bit, that's not a full inch that you're dealing with there. Maybe we keep talking about inches and it's awkward.
No, but skip the inches. You know, Byron talks about grips. You know, grips make a big difference. You know, Byron will grip with one hand and then he'll switch to the other hand just for a different feeling. So, grips play a big part in that too.
Thanks, Gary.
Back to jiu-jitsu. Byron, you did say something that I think is pretty important as you talked about maybe it works for you and it doesn't work for other people. And that is an important part of the equation. The same skateboard's not going to work for all skaters, different styles, different tricks. And it's the same thing with jiu-jitsu. The way that I play and the way that I set up chokes might dictate that I get certain grips, and the way you play it might dictate that you get other grips.
You said that, Joe, and I think a lot about our quote from a couple of weeks ago, ask an economist a question, ask 6 economists a question, you get 6 different answers. And Byron translated that into ask 6 black belts a question, you get 6 different answers. And man, I've really taken that to heart lately and really thought about that. And like you said, a little bit different for everybody. Everybody's got a, different way of doing stuff, a little different angle, a little different grip. And, just those little things, learn as much as possible. You may learn 2 or 3 different ways to skin a wounded cougar.
Yep. Gary's always wanting people to focus on the little things. But the quote of the week, I
get impatient. If you focus on the little things.
I guess you're right there. And that brings us right to the quote of the week. A little impatience will spoil great plans. This is a Chinese proverb. And man, that is so true with thinking about jiu-jitsu and being impatient with your progress. Hang in there. You'll have days when you come off the mat, you feel like, man, I just added 10% to my game in one day. Man, it was amazing. What we learned today was perfect for what I was learning. And you'll have a month where it feels like I might have slipped backwards a little bit. I really don't think I was doing very good this whole month. But don't be impatient. Just the big thing for me is to enjoy going to jiu-jitsu, and you will get better. But don't be impatient with your own jiu-jitsu to the point where it's kind of calling you off of the mat. I mean, it's okay to use a little impatience to build a little bit of urgency or motivation, but don't be frustrated with yourself with your jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I got a couple ways this relates to what you're actually doing on the mat every day. You think about when you're rolling with that really good black belt or that guy, he's better than you, and he can just hold you in whatever guard he wants, and everything you try isn't working. He's counting on eventually you're going to get impatient and you're going to make a bad move. You're going to do something out of desperation, and you're going to do the work for him, and you're going to set it up for him. So I think about that, and I also think about position before submission. How many times do you roll with a white belt and they get mount, and you're kind of feeding them the arm bar. You're letting them work on it. You're sort of giving it to them. And then they fly into it so fast with reckless abandon. And even though you were trying to be nice and trying to let them work that arm bar, you can't help but just come up on top because it's so sloppy, and it's that impatience. You got to move incrementally, a little bit at a time, and do it at the right time, and not just fly into it haphazardly.
Yeah, those are good points about impatience. Actually on the mat while you're rolling, be patient. And it takes you, I think part of that rushed thing that you get when you're new, I got mount, you're not going to have mount very long. And that's part of the problem. You need the confidence to hold the mount for a little while. But hey, while I got it, I might as well try an arm bar, and I better do it now. So controlling the mount is as important, if not more important, than learning how to finish from the mount, and work on that. And that'll make your finishes way better.
So you're saying be patient and work on the more important fundamentals before you worry about the finishes.
Yeah, just think about it. I think most jiu-jitsu schools are guilty of this. I know pretty much everyone I've helped train. I'll show 10 times more detail of how to do an armbar, how to finish the armbar, than I will how to maintain mount, how to deal with somebody who's shrimping aggressively, how to deal with somebody who's bridging, how to dismount to knee on belly and then maintain dominant position, slide right back on the mount. These are things I don't spend as much time on as I should, and they will help you be able to be more patient because you'll have confidence in your ability to maintain that position. Yeah,
I think patience really is the key word in jiu-jitsu. First of all, for the short-term things like you both are talking about, arm bars, you have to have a little bit of patience and, solidify your position before going to it. But jiu-jitsu is such a great art. Belts are not given to you, after a couple weeks, after a couple months. It's a long journey. You're going to spoil your armbar if you don't have the patience, to learn how to stabilize your position, how to really lock that arm out, how to, take all the slack out. Same thing. You're never going to get to that black belt level if you are impatient, because you're not getting a belt quick enough, or you're not learning stuff quick enough. It's a long journey. You've got to be patient. The fruits are going to come to you. Like Byron said, you're going to have some days where you feel like you're incredible. You're going to have some days where you're down and you feel like you're not learning anything. Those are the times where you're going to need the support of your teammates, your wife, your significant other, your friends, and, the mental toughness that you've built up to keep you going, because it's a long journey, but it's an incredible journey. And when you get that black belt put around you, it's a day you'll never forget.
Yeah, man, we can keep going on about this. I want to go on a little bit more because this is so. Gary mentions the support of your family and spouse or whatever support you have off the mat, and that's a big deal, especially if you come home and you're frustrated and you're impatient with yourself. If you're fortunate enough to have somebody that say, "Hey, keep your head up, you'll get better," or what's going on. With me, occasionally an interview will be scheduled while I would rather, I try to roll at certain times during the week. And if the only time somebody can interview is while I need to be on the mat, I need to weigh that. And sometimes the interview wins. And it's not a lot, but occasionally I'll miss my time on the mats for an interview. But I feel mostly it's if I have to reschedule and I got to cancel what time would work best. And they give me a time I'm available, not at work, but I'd rather it's my training time. I'll say, yes, that'll work for me. But so my wife will say, "Did you train today?" And I'll say, "No." And she immediately knows like something's off a little bit because this is a training day for me. Well, what happened? And if did you have a headache or what's up? It is not right. And that it's important to have somebody who wants you to do the things that are good for you, and surround yourself with those people. And if like my wife believes jiu-jitsu is good for me, she wants me to go do it. No, she doesn't want me to do it 9 times a day, but she 3 or 4 times a week, 5 times a week, she's thrilled that I'm going to go out there and do jiu-jitsu and get better and be healthy. And I think that's often overlooked as far as importance in staying on the mat long term, is support from people off of the mat.
A lot of people would hear you say 9 times a day and think that's ridiculous. It's not even conceivable. But that is why Byron is so good today. When he first started, for the first 6 months, he trained 9 times a day.
I included walking and eating as training.
Yeah, and his grip strength really increased.
Gary, you're killing me. All right.
9 times a day.
Oh, man. Okay, well, that wraps up the quote.
Hey, let's get serious here, and let's get on to the interview with Roy Harris.
He is the most interesting grappler in the world.
When he is training and nature calls, a horse comes to see him. If you take his back, you might notice him holding up a little rearview mirror. Objects in his mirror are just as close as they appear. He has never needed to remove clothing just to make weight, but he does anyway.
I don't always listen to podcasts, but when I do, I prefer the BJJ Brick podcast. Stay sweaty, my friends.
All right, my friends, I'm really excited to bring Roy Harris back to the BJJ Break podcast. Roy, you were on episode 98. We're well into the 200s here. It's been a couple of years. We're excited to bring you back. You recently wrote the book, The Jiu-Jitsu Answer Man. We've got a lot to talk about, Roy. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me back.
Great to have you back. We definitely have some new listeners and some people who are new to jiu-jitsu. Can you maybe just give yourself a quick description, I guess, and just kind of introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I have, I've been involved in martial arts since 1981. been involved in 27 different styles with 51 different instructors. I have a 6-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and a bunch of other black belts. And I've been privileged enough to teach 598 seminars in 25 countries. And the majority of those have been Jiu-Jitsu seminars. So I've been around the block a little bit with Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, wow, that's you have a number. You have a journal that you keep, or how do you know that number?
I am one of the things that I have that's both a blessing and a curse is I have a little bit of excuse me, what do I call it? A little bit of a nerdy, geeky, OCD tendency to keep track of things, and yeah, I've been keeping track of things for almost 20 years, and so it's just one of those quirks in my personality.
You were really one of the first people to get online and start helping people with jiu-jitsu. What was that like back then?
For me, it was really fun because I first opened up my academy in 1994, and I started to go online and search. You know, the internet was relatively new back then. And I found some different forums on there, different martial arts forums, and I just started answering people's questions because I had a whole lot of fun doing that. And what turned into a question here, a question there, turned into an hour here, 2 hours there, 6 hours here, 8 hours there. So the journey with the online stuff really started like in late 94, early 95.
Now looking at the internet, I'd imagine it's changed in more than just the technology ways, but the community aspect of it. What do you see as the differences or similarities?
Back then, jiu-jitsu was new here in the U.S., and it was kind of in little pockets of Europe. It was very, very new. And so, you know, the Gracies, they started teaching out of their garage, and in the 80s sometimes. I knew some people who were privately training with the Gracies in the middle 80s, you know, 84, 85, 86, somewhere around there. And it was still very new, but we didn't have things like YouTube. Back in those days, bandwidth was such an issue. I remember when I first learned how to do videos, I went to a video production training facility and learned how to do it. And then when I started producing my own videos and putting them up online in 1998, I was the first one to start doing this. And there was a lot of people loved it, but they wanted videos that were small but yet high quality, and it was so different back then. Nowadays, you know, I jokingly call some people YouTube scholars, you know, because they go and they search YouTube and they do. I mean, you can, I guess in some ways you can learn as much as you need to know to almost get to black belt on YouTube, because there's just so many thousands, even tens of thousands of videos out there. I wish we would have had this kind of resource when I was coming up through the rank, but we didn't. And so we had to go old school. I had to drive 2 hours and 45 minutes one way to take classes, and then drive back home and write my own notes. Nowadays, you know, you carry apps and YouTube and even some of your DVDs. People carry them in their pocket on their cell phone. So yeah, it's very, very different today.
Looking at the current situation with literally countless hours of YouTube techniques and competition footage, that can also be a negative, is trying to filter out what's actually going to help you and benefit you.
Yes, I definitely believe that way, because from my experience with all these different styles and all these different instructors, I see technique as an important starting point, because it helps to answer certain questions like, what do I do when a guy does this, and how do I get out of that? And so a technique is a great starting place, but technique alone doesn't really give an individual skill set. There's much more that goes into developing usable, repeatable, measurable skill sets than just technical knowledge. So I think there's a plus, a pro, in the idea of all this information is up and available. But because it hasn't been categorized and organized, some people, some students think that all the information is the same. In other words, a basic under-the-leg guard pass is equal to the cartwheel guard pass, and it's not. And so, YouTube has its pros and its cons, and so the technique aspect is good, but it's limited.
Yeah, and even if you're watching the same technique, maybe the person is actually very good at jiu-jitsu, but if they have a hard time explaining what's going on, it makes it difficult. And I think that there'll never be a time when your instructor or even your teammates aren't the most valuable people to helping you get better at jiu-jitsu. But it's like anything, it's a tool that we could use and to get better at jiu-jitsu. And like you were traveling 2, almost 3 hours to go train just one direction and come back with these new things. Now we don't have to travel, and I think that we can take this for granted a lot of times.
Yes, exactly.
Now, you got your black belt in 1998.
Yes.
One of the original Dirty Dozen.
Yes.
And really, I think you said 1994 is kind of the time you were hopping online and helping people with their jiu-jitsu on the internet. And I think that was part of what the idea with the book was. You had all these things that you had thought about and helped people with, and some of that you wanted to put into this book, the Jiu-Jitsu Answer Man. Is that correct?
Yes, I had answered, well, right around 96, 97-ish. There were a number of people who were new to jiu-jitsu, and they saw my answers on these different forums, and they said, hey, we really like what you're doing. Do you have a book? Well, no, I don't. What do you think about taking all that you've written and compiling it and putting it into a book format? And that way we have a book, we have something printed. And at the time, I thought it was a good idea, but just all the work and everything, and my writing abilities back in those days were not what they are now. And so I kind of put that on hold until finally I got so much feedback from so many different sources that in 2013, with the help of a good friend of mine, I started to assemble everything and rewrite a bunch of things, and then have an editor go through it and make my English much better than it actually was. And so, it was a labor of love. I have collected most of my writings, not all of my writings, and I put them in a Word document, and there's over 2,000 pages of stuff that I've written over the years. And so I took a series of questions that I thought would interest the beginner, the white belt, an intermediate level student, the purple belt, and even some teaching and tactical things for the savvy brown belt or the new black belt. And so that's how the Jiu-Jitsu Answer Man book came about.
The book, you talk about other martial arts. You're involved with 27 other styles of martial arts, and you've been trained by over 50. I think it's 51 instructors.
Yes.
But you really use that as a pool for resources. This is mostly a book about jiu-jitsu. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. It's mostly about jiu-jitsu.
But it's interesting to see some of your answers kind of, I think, pull from the knowledge you've gained in other arts.
Yes, because while I love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like many other arts, I believe it has certain limitations, and I'm not from the school of thought that says it's all about technique. From my perspective, being involved in all these other different styles, as well as training with all of these instructors, I've been taught that technique is only a small part of the game. The big part of the game are the training methods. How do you actually train? This is what is going to affect your skill sets. And so that came from my involvement in Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do, specifically with Guru Dan Inosanto and Sifu Rick Fei, whom I started with in Minneapolis, Minnesota in 1981.
Okay, I guess this makes sense if you think about it, because a lot of these techniques can be used in other martial arts, but we train differently. I think some of our drilling and our live sparring, is that the big difference with jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, than it is with a lot of the other arts that do grappling? Like,
yes, when you look at wrestling or sambo, whenever these guys who have been practitioners in wrestling and sambo and even judo, when they come to train with us, even though they are white belts in jiu-jitsu, because they train in this brother-sister grappling art, and because their training and how they've been coached, there's been so much more of an effort on actually developing a foundation that is outside of technique. This is why we find it so difficult to spar with them. You know, I have spent a lot of time with wrestlers, and I've asked them, if you could give me a number, a wild guess, how many bridges did your coaches make you do? And I've had some guys say, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions. And so because the bridge is one of 4 or 5 unstoppable movements in the world of grappling, and because you have a person who has put in these 6 figures, 7 figures with the amount of repetitions, the bridge is fundamental to your escapes. That's why we have a difficult time holding wrestlers and judoka on their back. That's why they go to their knees. Also, the bridge is fundamental to most of your submissions, like an arm lock, a knee lock, a rear naked choke. And so when you have somebody who has a fundamental movement that is strong and they've got some other qualities to back that up, and then you add that to a basic bridge and roll, escape from the mount, or a basic replace the guard, escape from the side mount, that's why we have so much difficulty with these people who train in the other grappling arts, is because it's not the technique. It's the fact that they have a group of muscles that are really strong and that have endurance that they've built up over 5, 10, 15 years that obviously apply to jiu-jitsu. And it's about how a person trains, and not so much the technique. Because here's the big picture as I see it. You've got the technical aspect of training. You've got the training methods, which which address speed, power, explosiveness, endurance, precision, all the physical qualities that are part of the game. And technique is supposed to represent leverage. But there's a portion of athleticism that can override leverage. That's why, as I remember as a blue belt, when these wrestlers came in just to check out jiu-jitsu, us white and blue belts, we had a really difficult time with them. And even some of the purple belts had a difficult time with them, but they could eventually submit them only from inside the guard, because they couldn't put the wrestler on the back, or even if they couldn't keep him on the back. So they had to finish them with guillotine choke, with triangle choke with the legs, with kimura, with the X choke, or the fist choke with the collars. And so, athleticism can sometimes trump leverage, especially in the beginning of a person's experience in jiu-jitsu, the white and the blue belts. And that is something that, over time I plan to address and expand on, because it's an important area for people to understand. Not saying that athleticism trumps leverage, But at certain points in time in an individual's experience, it can trump leverage.
And that could be a frustrating experience too.
Oh, yes.
To think that I'm doing pretty good here. I've got this to work against these people over here, and suddenly a new person who, they have a background, wrestling or something that they're bringing to the table, but they're new to the gym, and it doesn't work. And yes, it will work, but you still need to work on it a little bit, or change a few things, or just develop that time that they put into it. You mentioned something that got me flipping my book. So everyone listen, I have your book. It's I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun, and I learned a lot reading it. But you mentioned the unstoppable movement, and I immediately turned to page 45. In case you guys, if anybody listening could go there. Well, this page for me is all has a lot of underlining. You mentioned unstoppable movement, and that is one of the examples was the bridge. Another one, yes, I think that really speaks to me is the shrimp. Could you maybe talk about the concept of unstoppable movement and just explain that a little bit?
Yes, the for my own not only martial arts training, but for so much of what I do in life, to simplify things, I use the analogy of the tree. The roots are what make the trunk possible. The trunk makes make the branches possible, and it's the branches that make the leaves and the fruit possible. Techniques represent the branches and the leaves. They're far, far away from the roots, and so I think it's not only important to learn information, I think it's important to also categorize the information so that people don't think a basic passing the guard over the leg is the same as somebody doing a cartwheel guard pass, because they're not. Both are possible, but one is more fundamental to a person's experience, especially for the beginners. So I started to take a look at movements, not so much techniques, but movements, and started to look at what are the most important movements in jiu-jitsu and what are the movements that everybody does, regardless of whether it's a brand new white belt, a seasoned blue belt, or the brown belt who is just a few months away from getting his black belt. What are these movements that matter most? And as I took a look at everything, I wrote all this stuff down, and then I began to categorize them. And I saw that the bridge was the most fundamental of all movements because it applies to all of your escapes and the majority of your submissions. Plus, the bridge is how you actually start to develop pressure. Pressure is not done with the arms. It's done with the back and with the chest. And so the bridge came out number one. And as I started to play with the bridge, I actually took one student, stood on top of his hips. And even though I outweighed the student by 80, almost 90 pounds, I couldn't stop them from bridging. And so I thought, that's kind of an interesting observation. The bridge is not only fundamental, but it's an unstoppable movement. Can't stop it. I wonder if there are other movements that are unstoppable. And so that's how I came up with this whole idea of categorizing information, learning the information that is truly at the root level before you get to the trunk, before you get to the branches. And the bridge is the most important movement to learn, practice, and develop. And then next came the shrimp. Now, I do the shrimp different than the, standard traditional way. And the reason why I do it different is because, like everybody, I learned from my instructors. I turned onto my left side, and my bottom leg is straight, my top leg is bent, my right leg is bent, and I push with one leg, and I drag my butt and my thigh across the mat. And that worked fine when nobody was on top of me, and it worked fine when I had somebody lighter than myself on me, but once I sparred with guys my own size and guys who were heavier than me, it didn't work as well. So on my own, I went to the drawing board and said, what's the problem? Well, the problem that I saw was I'm only driving with one leg. Why don't I drive with two legs? Two legs are better than one. So I drove with two legs, and that helped much more. But there was still a problem. I still struggled with the guys who outweighed me by 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds. And then I went back to my drawing board and was like, what's the problem here? The problem here is drag. It's friction. I'm dragging my butt and my thigh across the mat. What happens if I precede the shrimp with a bridge and elevate my lower back, my butt, and my thighs off of the mat, and then I do the shrimp? Oh, wow, this works a lot better. Let me try it on that big guy over there. Hey, this works really well. And that's what I did. So all of my shrimping came from the bridge. It preceded a bridge. Funny thing about that was when my instructors saw me do that, they said, no, that's incorrect. So when my instructors were looking, I did it their way. When my instructors weren't looking, I did it my way. And so bridge is unstoppable, and because the bridge is unstoppable, once the hips are up in the air, you can turn onto your side and do either a single shrimp or a continuous shrimp, and the person on top of you can't stop it.
Yeah, for me, this helps a lot when I'm just stuck in side control and it's going kind of tough, and I feel like this person is just got me pinned down, and there's nothing I can do about it. I think about, really, can they stop me with what is most of the time their arm on their far side of my body? Can they stop my hips and my back and my legs from moving outward? and just that little kind of that putting myself in that mindset, like this should be really hard for them to stop this from happening, and then frame up and do that unstoppable movement. And I think a lot of times it just gives me a little bit more confidence in executing that escape than just to know that, yeah, it would be very difficult to hold my body still at this point.
Yes.
You mentioned that the bridge can be used in an offensive way. Can you maybe go a little deeper into this and help me understand that?
Yes. A bridge upside down is a sprawl.
Okay.
Do you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, a bridge upside down is a sprawl. You know, when I started the whole journey with pressure way back when, I made this observation. And interestingly, my first nickname that the jiu-jitsu community gave me was not Boa. It was actually Viper. Because I had experienced the pressure, the heaviness from one of my instructors, and I tried to replicate it. And not really knowing what I was doing and not being taught, I just squeezed with all of my might with my arms. And so I developed this very tight game, but there was no engagement on the muscles in my back, the rhomboids, the erectors. So I had a tight game, but I wasn't very heavy. And then several years later, I started to experiment with the bridge and the sprawl. And I discovered, the sprawl, driving my hips down and my belly down and my chest down, I can become heavier even without anchoring my forearms under a person's body. I have sparred with people and tapped them from the side mount by having my hands on the mat, my forearms on the mat, so there's nothing underneath their neck, nothing underneath their shoulder, nothing underneath their back. And all I did was engage the muscles in my back. And so by learning how to bridge and drive one's hips and belly into something, you can actually make yourself 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds heavier. I have one of my black belts who is between 160 and 170 pounds. When people spar with him, they swear he weighs 250 pounds. Why? Because as soon as he gets on top, from half guard to side mount to scarf hold to front mount, he's laying on them and using all the muscles in his back. Of course, it helps that he's a surfer dude, because that's what you do on a surfboard. You lay on the board and you swim and you engage those muscles in your back. And so, by turning that bridge upside down and driving your hips and your belly and your chest into a person, you feel a lot heavier than you actually are.
You, in your book, you answer a lot of questions. You have them divided. You have a chapter on questions for beginners, intermediate, a chapter for those of us that are over 40 and 50. And I think that chapter, I guess it's chapter 3, you start to talk about pressure versus just tightness and the differences of those. And is there something you could do to help me understand the differences between the two?
Yes. In the world of jiu-jitsu, regardless of the practitioner, there's only 3 games that are possible. The first game that I will mention is the standard game that I see amongst most practitioners out there. The tournaments that I've gone to, the stuff I've seen on YouTube, the instructionals, I see this game as the predominant game. And it's the game of space and looseness. With this game, you have thousands and thousands of techniques because there's all that space.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of movement. Nothing wrong with it, but that's just one way of doing jiu-jitsu. Second way of doing jiu-jitsu is having a game that is tight. This is the opposite of the loose game. Now there are a lot of hugging motions that are done with the arm, and the chest and the neck are kept close to the opponent's body, so that there's a lot less space to do anything. And with that lack of space, there's not as many opportunities for a variety of techniques. So you got the space and loose oriented game. You've got the tightness game, and that's usually something that happens from the belly button up. And then third, you've got the pressure game. And the pressure game is a game that I have developed over the years that focuses on, there's 3 levels of pressure. The first level of pressure is it's related to tightness, but there is a small level of discomfort with the tightness. The second level is more of an extreme level of tightness, but it's heaviness in specific areas that causes your training partners to do specific things in relationship to the pressure that you're applying. And then finally, there's the third level of pressure where the focus is to either A, squeeze the air out of them so they make it so it's very difficult for them to breathe, or B, get them to tap. And that's the kind of pressure that everybody wants once they've heard about pressure, once they've seen my app on pressure. But that pressure is actually something that takes a while to develop. So pressure is a great addition to positioning. It's not so much related to technique, although there are some techniques that I do pressure with. It's mainly related to how a person positions themselves in relationship to their opponent or their training partner. Now, positioning, I like to use the analogy of a door. Let's say that I am 6'2" and 375 pounds of solid muscle, and I have 4% body fat. And I am standing 12 feet away from a door that opens outward and away from me. Can I open the door from that position? The answer is no. I can't, because I'm so far away, there's no way that I can actually make contact with the door. So that's the first position. Second position, I'm now standing next to the door, and I have my right hand, my dominant hand, I have it on the hinged side of the door, and I have it near the top of the door. Question is that I always ask students, can I open the door? Most say no. Some say yes, but. And I tell them the correct answer is yes, but. It's yes, but it's going to require so much more additional strength and force to open the door. It's like, yes, that is correct. It's a yes, but answer. Third position, I now move towards the handle side of the door, but my hand is still high up near the top of the door. Can I open the door from this position? Yes, I can, but still, even there, I'm going to use more strength than what is really necessary to open the door. And then finally, the fourth position, I place my hand down by the handle side of the door, and then I push open. This fourth position is true leverage. The first position is not possible. The second position, it's possible, but it requires so much more assistance from athleticism. The third position, where I got my hand on the handle side of the door, but still it's high, that still requires athleticism. Pure leverage is only found when you position yourself properly before you execute a technique. So the difference between positioning and pressure is this heaviness, this weight that's being driven at a specific angle, at a specific point on an individual's body. And positioning is what you do. It's how you place your body before you even begin to execute a technique.
Yeah, and I could just read a sentence here from your book. You talk about that door concept, and you say, how a student positions themselves before they begin the process of executing a technique will determine the amount of force used. And
yes.
Like, where are you next compared to the door? Where are you compared to their body? It's still the same door, regardless of what's going on. The door hasn't changed its weight. It doesn't change resistance. But there's totally different ability to move that door depending on where you are positionally to that door. Same thing with the person you're doing jiu-jitsu with. I think that's a great concept.
And so I came up with this because I have a very analytical mind, and I always, since I was a young kid, I've always taken things apart, to show my age. I was born in the 60s, and I remember a transistor radio that I was given by my parents. And one of the first things I did was I took the radio apart. I didn't put a battery in it and turn it on. I took it apart because I wanted to know how it worked. That is, I've had this in my personality, in my genes since I was a little boy. And so I've done this same thing with jiu-jitsu and my involvement in Jeet Kune Do and Filipino martial arts and Indonesian martial arts. And so I took a look at what is required for me to actually execute a technique. And as I did this, I made certain discoveries. For example, starting out your escapes from front mount, side mount, scarf hold, starting them out on your back is starting out disadvantaged. The back is the absolute worst position for you to be in, with the exception of 2 points in time. So for front mount escapes, you don't start on your back. You always start on your side. Side mount escapes, you always start on your side, not your back. Scarf hold escapes, you start on your side. Knee on the belly escapes, you start on your side. Half guard escapes, you start on your side. North and south escapes, you start on your side. Back mount escapes, you start on your side. And so starting on your side is primary to using less force and less movement to accomplish your goals.
Oh, and does that tie back into the unstoppable movements?
Yes, because once I have positioned myself, then I'm going to execute a fundamental movement. One of my formulas that I use for my students and for my instructors is this. First, I teach a student how to position himself or herself. That is primary. That's most important. Second, as I teach them some fundamental movements, like the bridge, like the shrimp, like throwing the legs and sitting up onto your butt. Then I teach them postures. How do you place your arms, lower arm, upper arm, shoulder, and neck? How do you place those, and where do you place those in relationship to your training partner or your opponent? Then, number 4, now I introduce them to technique. So first there's positioning, then there's fundamental movement, then there's postures, and then there's technique. If you teach technique first, it doesn't have context. And not only does it not have context, but the student's arms end up exposed or their neck ends up exposed. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That really helps explain it. There's a lot in this book, and I just keep, I guess, referring to it because I read it a little while ago, and it was really interesting. And somebody might be thinking to themselves, well, these aren't necessarily the questions I have. It's amazing how many of the shared questions that people have. There's an infinite amount of questions you have in jiu-jitsu, but 90% of them are going to be asked by a lot of people over and over again. And you've taken some of the most common ones or the ones that are enjoyable or something that we can learn from and gain from and put them in this book. One concept that I found really interesting you talked about was what to look for in a good training partner. Mm-hmm. You talked a lot about attitude as being a big deal. Can you describe that a little bit? Because maybe I think people get confused. They want to grab the highest skilled person they can, help them out. But sometimes getting the right person doesn't necessarily mean that as being the best training partner for them.
Yes. At the beginning, at the root, I think everyone needs to ask themselves some questions and take the time to answer these questions so that they know where to go. You know, here's how I look at jiu-jitsu for me, and here's how many of my students look at jiu-jitsu in their own experience, and that is, what am I doing this for? And the majority of my students say the same thing. This is a hobby. This is something I do for fun. While the tournament scene is cool, I'm not really into that because, and there's all kinds of reasons from, you know what, I got a busy job, I got a busy life at home with the wife and the kids, because there are certain things that goes along with the tournament game, like there's the preparation for it, where you got to commit X amount of time to get in shape for the tournament, and that preparation time sometimes involves injury. And the injuries can affect your, not just your training in jiu-jitsu, but they can also affect your personal life at home and at work. I've actually had some students who've trained with me, and they have graduated from the university here, and they've gone back home, and they train at another facility now, and they've actually been told to make a choice between their job and jiu-jitsu because they got injured, you know, their shoulder got injured, their elbow got injured, they got a black eye. And remember one guy told me, my supervisor told me I can't keep putting you in front of CEOs, CFOs, CIOs looking like you've been in a back alley brawl because you got this rash on your face or you got a black eye or whatever is going on. And so by asking these questions, what am I doing this for? And if the tournament thing is your thing, that's good for you. But tournament fighting is not for everybody. Myself, I got involved in jiu-jitsu because I wanted to learn how to fight on the ground, and because my coaches told me I need to learn how to fight on the ground because I had done long rifle, shotgun, handgun, stick, knife, rope, chain, kickboxing, boxing, trapping, clinch work, but I just hated the ground. So the ground for me was about self-defense. And then the more I got involved in it, I really enjoyed the art of jiu-jitsu, in that this was something that I felt as though I could train and spar with well into my 70s and my 80s. So by asking those questions, what am I getting involved in this for? It really lays a foundation for what kind of school am I going to seek out? What kind of instructor am I going to seek out? And then finally, what kind of partners am I going to seek out to help me on this journey? Because not every student that you train with is really ideal for what it is you are going for. I remember at my academy, I had, even though it was one jiu-jitsu class, honestly, I felt like I was teaching 4 jiu-jitsu classes at the same time. Why? Because I had one group of students, the alpha males, the killers, the guys who are very concerned about either tournament fighting or realism. And so I had them in one corner. Then I had in another corner, I had the talkaholics. the guys and the gals that they just can't practice a technique. They have to talk about this and talk about that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're going there because you want to relieve some stress and you want to do whatever it is, and you got this person who, while everybody else has done 10, 11, 12 repetitions, you've only done one because this person is talking. So that is one classification of student. Then we had the third class of students, kind of the foofy students, the people who don't want to sweat, and they certainly don't want to touch somebody else's sweat. And so by determining what am I doing this jiu-jitsu thing for and what are my goals will help the student to seek out other people who are like-minded. And so I think it's important that first the student asks themselves this question, and then secondly, when they're actually involved in class at an academy, to find people who are like-minded. Because I've got an inbox full of emails from guys and gals in their 40s and their 50s that have just grown tired of the 20-year-olds who kind of have a mindset where they're focused on realism, or they still have something to prove and they want to go out and beat up whoever is in front of them. They're tired of the injuries. And so asking those preliminary questions of yourself and then finding people at your academy who are of the same the same vibe, the same mindset is crucial to staying involved in the art for 1, 2, 3, 4, even 5 decades.
Wow. And that's something that a lot of students don't do. You go in there for a way to relax after work, or I guess, change your day, I guess. You sit in the office all day and you want to do something different and exercise and get some social aspect out of it. And you end up getting these death matches with guys who are training to compete. And it's like, this may not be for me. I think that's something also the instructors could pick up on too when you match somebody up. Don't just match them with the best student that is available for them to get. Figure out what their goals are and figure out who would be a good partner for them to have. Because a lot of students, don't think about that when they show up to train jiu-jitsu.
You hit the nail on the head. The responsibility is that of the instructor, not of the student. Back in my day when I had my academy, I had Navy SEALs that trained with me and came to me and said this particular message, which I'll share with you in a little bit. I had cardiothoracic surgeons who came to me and said the same thing. I had a bunch of different people who come to me and said, you know what, I work with my hands for a living and I cannot get injured. I need you to protect me. It's your responsibility to protect me. And after they explained their whole situation to me, I said, aye, yes, sir. And so when they came to class and I saw them walk over to the alpha male area, I was like, no, stop. Come over here. I want you to work with this group of people. It was my responsibility as an instructor. And so I think it's important, if not imperative, for all students to have a talk with their instructor, because the instructor is responsible for the environment. And if this particular student likes to go hard or wants to go hard, then he or she should be put with the other students that like to go hard and want to go hard. And they accept the small, minuscule injuries that are going to occur from time to time. And then the people who don't want that, well, it's the instructor's responsibility to put them with other people. It's also the student's responsibility to talk to the instructor and talk to their fellow classmates and have the ability to say no. Like with my over 40 and over 50 people, when we talk, especially the over 50 people, one of the first mindsets that I teach them is learn to say no. And learn how to deal with that ego factor that says, oh, yeah, so-and-so's not going to, I know why so-and-so doesn't want to spar with me. He's afraid of me. He's a wussy. He's a whatever. You got to let those ego things go, and you got to focus on the big rocks that you're going to put in the container first. Why are you here? Are you not here for enjoyment? Are you not here for the fact that this should be a safe environment? Are you not here to progress in the art of jiu-jitsu and develop usable, repeatable, measurable skill sets? Well, good. Then how are these injuries going to help you? It's your responsibility to communicate that with your instructors as well as with your classmates. And if somebody is unwilling to go along with that program, then you tell them no.
Wow, that is a great thing to tell people how to treat themselves and to feel about jiu-jitsu. I'm reminded of the 20-40-60 rule that I talk about sometimes on the show. When you're 20, you care what people think about you. It's important to you that they accept you. When you're 40, you don't really care that much. And when you're 60, you realize that people aren't thinking about you. They're dealing with their own lives and their own problems. And when they do think about you, you're right in front of them, and it's a quick thing, and it's passing. And so to worry about what people think about you is pretty much a waste of time. And
it is.
And I like how you mentioned that it's the responsibility of the instructor to get the people matched up and make sure they're safe if that's their biggest priority. If it's not their biggest priority, get them with the right people to give them what they're looking for. And then you mentioned it's also the student's responsibility. And that's really something I've found in the past couple of years has taken injuries out of jiu-jitsu for me basically entirely, is I am 100% responsible for my own safety on the mat. If I roll with somebody who injures me, that's my fault. And it's a little different than if you're brand new. But did I not explain to them that I have to be healthy to do my job? Did I not? Was the tone of the roll off? I don't know. I tried to take all the responsibility for anything that happens to be on the mat, and that's just taken out injuries for me. Pretty much wiped them off. And
yes,
that's been a big thing. And I think that for instructors, especially for the new students, to take that and say, okay, I'm going to make sure you're safe, or make sure you get what you want. If you want to do, super hard rolls, you're going to get that. But you have to know that there's some drawbacks with that. And I don't roll super easy all the time, but the people I am rolling hard with, I trust them. And I choose those people, I think, pretty wisely, and it's been a great thing for helping me stay on the mat longer and longer.
Injuries are the number one reason. Injuries and attitude are the number one and the number two reasons why people quit jiu-jitsu.
And injuries definitely affect attitude.
Oh yeah, and it's the attitude is. One, attitude is also personal opinion. Attitude is also the responsibility of the instructor. For example, when I had my academy, and students would walk in and I would see a frown on their face, or they would throw their bag off to the side or kick the chair. And I saw 50-60% of the students had this kind of attitude when they walked into the class. I knew I couldn't teach them anything. So I didn't even try as an instructor to teach them anything. What I did was I said, okay, let's warm up on some drills. One side is going to try and pass the guard. The other side is going to prevent them from passing the guard. And the side who accomplishes their goal within this 2-minute round, they get to smile. The side that doesn't accomplish their goal, well, they owe the other person 10 burpees, 10 push-ups, 10 sit-ups, whatever it is. Good. Now that the round is over, do your exercises and switch partners. And so this was my way of introducing endorphins and adrenaline into the situation, because I know that adrenaline and endorphins can change mood, which can change attitudes. And then when I saw the frowns dissipate and I saw smiles, now I could teach them something. And so as a teaching point, I think it's important that, and this is why I require all the instructors in my association to go through an instructor course, because it's not just about showing technique. That's show and tell. You're not a teacher. You're not an instructor. You need to know how to teach. You need to know how to manage group dynamics. You need to know how to deal with the issues that come up, the hygiene issues that come up, the gender issues that come up, the training issues that come up. And so this is an area that I think is really missing in the jiu-jitsu world, is how do you teach and how do you manage a cross-section of society where you've got people who don't think anything about not washing their gi, not cutting their fingernails. Their breath smells so bad you can smell them 6 feet away from them. These are issues that come up, and as an instructor, you gotta deal with them.
Yeah, it's really controlling the culture and the environment.
Yes.
Weighs on the instructor's shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I think we could talk another hour on training instructors and building quality people to run academies. But if you were to give me just a cheat sheet of a couple of things that are really important, what would be on that?
As an instructor, number one on your list, create a safe, fun, and enjoyable environment for everybody. Not just your favorite students and not just your competition team. Create a safe and enjoyable environment for everybody. That would be number one on the list. Number two on the list, as an instructor, you have a responsibility to make sure that you have smiling, satisfied, sweaty customers. That's your goal.
Yeah.
And so those are two huge rocks that definitely need to be put into the jar first. How much you know as a purple, brown, black belt, that doesn't matter. Do you create an environment that is conducive to learning for everybody? The answer is yes or no. And do you make a concerted effort to make sure that all of your clients leave sweaty, smiley, and satisfied?
Reading your book, and like that example of that answer is just phenomenal. And I think you've been in this game a long time, but reading your book, I could tell, and you've mentioned it, that you like to think about things and write things down, and I think that really helps organize your thoughts. And that's one thing I've learned, not so much jiu-jitsu reading your book, but just exploring how to learn something even at a deeper level. I think, would it be fair to say that as you've taken these questions and written articles, you've kind of taught yourself or really explored your own side of jiu-jitsu, and it's helped you understand it at a deeper level?
Oh, yes, definitely. Definitely. Because in the end, I do a lot of reading, and I love reading Jack Canfill's stuff, Tony Robbins' stuff, Brian Tracy, a lot of the guys who talk about success. I really like the fact that they don't determine success for the individual. They allow the individual to say, well, success for me is, making $1 million. Success for me is having all of these things. Success for me is being a good father and a good husband. So I really like that. And many of the things that I have taken from them, I have tried to apply to myself as an instructor. And one of the key things that they talk about is this: is what you're doing working? Is it accomplishing the goals that you had in your mind? And the answer is yes or no. If it's not working, then it's time to change. If it is working, well, is there a way that you can make it work better? Is it a way that you can tweak it and make it more efficient? And so I think this is an important question, not only for students, but especially for instructors. Is what you're doing working?
On or off the mat?
Yes.
You could be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big lesson.
Mm-hmm.
I really like this book a lot, and you work with law enforcement, and I wrote down something I wanted to ask you about. Do you have any advice, like, yet again, kind of a cheat sheet thing, because obviously we don't have an hour we could spend about law enforcement, but you help law enforcement. Let's assume somebody is doing jiu-jitsu already, blue belt level, they're in law enforcement. What advice do you have for them as far as with their training for jiu-jitsu?
Find and focus on the things that are specific to your role as a police officer and focus on them. In other words, don't be enamored with the tournament stuff. Don't fall in love with the things that are personally satisfying. Is this going to help you accomplish your goal? And the number one goal in law enforcement is it's a very selfish goal. It's a very personal goal, but it's very important, and that is going home safely at EOS at the end of your shift. There's a lot of stuff that law enforcement is called to do that is really, really difficult for them to do. And first, they got to protect themselves because they are human beings. And so find a jiu-jitsu instructor who knows and understands what it is you do for a living, as well as what it is you can and cannot do. Because the world of law enforcement has changed a lot since I was involved in it. Nowadays, there's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking going on because of the cameras. The officers are wearing body-worn cameras, and some of that footage is making itself available on YouTube and some of these other formats. And then you add to that the general public who carries around an Android, an iPhone, a Windows phone. They've got a camcorder on their phone, and they video record it. And so now everybody wants to judge what it is you're doing. And so I think it's important that officers who study jiu-jitsu, that they do it for both professional and personal reasons. And the personal reasons, that's good if you involve yourself with tournaments. That's good that you involve yourself in these other things. But they have to delineate the difference between the stuff I'm going to use in tournaments and at the gym, at the academy, versus the stuff I'm actually going to use in my job.
Yeah,
I think that's imperative that they make that separation.
And you mentioned that the goal is to go home safely, and we automatically think about not getting injured or killed. And same thing with people in the military. We want you guys home safe. Yes. Also, we want you guys to come back mentally safe as well. And I think that's you mentioned getting people to smile and have a good time on the mat. Same thing, law enforcement, military. It's a great place to go and just forget about things and get that adrenaline system working and just cut loose of all the stuff that's happened and the stuff you've seen or had to go through.
Yeah, it's jiu-jitsu is a great release and a great escape because you get focused on a particular task at hand. Oh, I know this guy Jim. I've never swept him. I'm going to try and focus on sweeping him tonight, and then all your worries and all that stuff goes away, and you're smiling, you're sweaty, you feel like, oh, I finally swept Jim tonight. Man, that feels really good. And man, I'm exhausted. I'm going to sleep good tonight. That's great stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Agree. Roy, been a pleasure having you on here again. I don't want to wait as long as we did last time, but where is the best place? You could buy the book at a lot of places, but which place would be the best place where you'd send somebody to find your book?
Go to my website, royharris.com, and click on the resources link, and you'll find the book in there. And read, enjoy, repeat. I wrote the book not for people to read, but for people to study and ponder. And so go to royharris.com, click on the resources tab, find the book, order the book, whether you get the physical book or the Kindle book, and then read and study. There's this, I'll say this last thing, there's this process. You learn, you practice, and you develop. Learning, we really don't get the gist of what that word really means. Learn means to grasp, understand, and memorize. That's what learning means. You grasp it, so that's like, okay, I think I got it. I think I Okay, that's good. And then you try to understand it. You tie it to a familiar piece of information in your brain. Okay, I understand it. And then you memorize it. So you know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 3, 5, 4, 2. You know the information forward, backwards, inside, and out. That's how you learn. You practice. Practice is just like learning. It's only physical. Now you're going to try and grasp, understand, and memorize the information in your muscles, and then eventually in your skin, having the ability to feel and read pressure and follow with what you feel on your skin. And then finally develop. You're going to develop a specific aspect of this. You're going to make it faster. You're going to make it stronger. You're going to develop your sense of timing and awareness. And so buy the book, read the book, let it sink into your brain, and then read it a second time and underline some things and make some notes in it. And watch how it will affect your mindsets and watch how it will affect your game.
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of it underlined, and you've got, I always appreciate it in a book, a couple pages at the back for notes. It's saying that write down how you interpret this and what it means to you, because we're all on this journey, and a lot of the similar things pop up for a lot of us, but we react to those differently. And I read all the questions in here. A lot of them don't apply to me, but a lot of them apply to my teammates or people I know, and that sort of thing, and help me be a better teammate because, okay, I've understand maybe where you're coming from on this one because of this. I just think it's a tremendous resource. There's a lot of books out there that have 1,000 techniques on how to do an arm bar or whatever. This is really about understanding jiu-jitsu and helping you understand yourself and kind of your role and stay on the mat. I think this is a great resource that people should pick up, really, no matter where you are on your journey. It'd be good for those that are new. I learned a lot as a black belt reading this, and I think it's a tremendous resource. I know you have other stuff out there as well, apps, anything coming around the corner?
Yeah, I am in the process of developing a new breed of apps. They'll be available this fall. So nothing this spring or summer, but they'll be available this fall. And I am about to break new ground. I'm going to do something that hasn't been done before, kind of like, when leg locks came along in jiu-jitsu, or when wrist locks or takedowns from the knees. It was something that was kind of new. I plan on breaking new ground with my apps this fall, and I'm very excited about it. And that info will be available on my website as well, royharris.com.
Yeah, man, I've got a lot of stuff I didn't cover. There's a lot of stuff in the book. The biggest surprise, several times you mentioned biting, and
yes,
and just. We didn't talk about that today, guys, but go and check that out. I thought that was really fascinating coming from, or at least reading it for me. I hadn't really thought about that much. And just your experiences with that, you share some stories. You've got a whole bunch of stuff in the back that are just like crazy stories that you've experienced. We didn't cover any of those today either, but a lot more stuff that we didn't cover. Go to the website. You've had this up there for, I don't know, a little while, but you have these giant boxing gloves. Could you,
yes.
Before I let you go, what is up with that? I mean, it's a funny picture, but I've seen that with you before.
I'm a firm believer that laughter is one of the best medicines for life. And many years ago, I was in this martial arts supply store, and I saw these gloves. And I thought, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. And I actually bought those gloves back in the late 1990s and haven't used them. And then on one of the photo shoots, I decided to use them, and we had so much fun playing around with them. And so, yeah, it's just the martial arts, while there definitely is a serious side to it, I think there's also a very fun side to it. And so I like to have fun with martial arts, and I bought those gloves just because they're fun, and students, they're like, hey, can I try them on? Wow, these are really big, man. They cover my whole arm. Yeah, it's just a fun part of a fun extracurricular activity.
What a great way to be. And you could so that's the one spectrum. In the book, you'll read stories of him getting attacked by a guy with a knife or by two different people coming at him. And then you have the lighthearted here to enjoy and make sure the students have a good time.
Yes.
Roy Harris, it's a pleasure having you back on the show.
Well, thank you again for having me, and this was a lot of fun. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. I want to thank Roy Harris for jumping on the show with us. Go check out his other interview with us. A lot of good stuff both times. His book, we'll put a link to that in the show notes. I read it cover to cover, enjoyed it. He's got a section on there where he shares stories, just crazy stories that happened to him all over the world, jiu-jitsu related. And they're kind of like mat tales. And man, what a thing to include in a book. Most of the book is helping you and like guidance and just answering questions. But he throws in there it's just entertainment, I guess. He had, and I won't do it justice, you got to read it, but he was in some foreign country and he's teaching a seminar. It's going good. It's jiu-jitsu seminar, not self-defense or anything like that. He's got two guys saying, how can you deal with two people that attack you? He goes, yeah, I feel I could deal with that. And they're kind of being confronting him about this. And he politely goes on teaching a seminar. And eventually these two guys attack him. And I'll leave out some of the details because it's in the book. But he defends himself quickly and efficiently. So, and those guys were surprised. But yeah, that book was a blast to read. Gary, I'll have to drop it off at your place one of these times and let you read it because I have it. But yeah, anyway, man, thrilled to have him back on the show. We'll get him back sometime for sure in the future. Man, it's a blast, and I learned a lot. Something else that helps us a lot is when you tell your friends about the podcast. Seems like a simple thing, but really, if you enjoy the show and your friends have a similar, I don't know, sense of humor, similar interests like jiu-jitsu, those are the friends we're talking about. We're not talking about your work friends or your camping friends or your church friends. We're talking about your jiu-jitsu friends. Tell your jiu-jitsu friends about the podcast. If they're not familiar with podcasts, tell them how to download a podcast. It's pretty easy. The easiest way is to get the app, BJJ Brick app, and it's pretty easy player as well. But if they already download podcasts, go find it wherever you get them. Super easy. It's free. We're here every week trying to bring you interesting stuff to help you on your jiu-jitsu journey and give you a few laughs, chokes, and jokes by definition. And they've been making fun of me the whole episode.
Hey, also tell your friends about the big event coming up June 22nd, June 23rd, and June 24th, 2018. Good old Wichita, Kansas. It's the Brickapalooza, the first BJJ Brick event. June 22nd is an open mat, Fox Fitness, Wichita, Kansas. June 23rd, Tim Sled will be here. Rolly Delgado will be here. They will be teaching seminars. Gonna learn a ton. You cannot miss that day. June 23rd should be the most important day of the year. June 24th, what do we got going on the 24th, Joe?
I think we're going to have a special guest, Byron Jabara, accompanied by his sidekick, Gary Hall. Those two are better known as Grapple Man and the Jits Kid. And, I'll be tagging along as well. So, yeah, we'll have the BJJ Brick crew bringing you some jiu-jitsu, and it might not be the same caliber as you got the day before, but it will be fun, and we will get better at jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, like Joe said, the caliber, the day before, it's going to be a 44 Magnum. On the 23rd, the 24th, it's going to be a pellet gun.
Yeah, it'd be one of those little CO2 cartridges.
It's almost empty anyway.
Yeah.
No, but on the BJJ Brick Day, where Gary and I are showing some stuff, we're gonna give you our best, and we're gonna have a great time doing that. And looking forward to getting to meet some of the listeners, hopefully a lot of the listeners, and train with you. If you are going to be traveling to get here, send me an email. If you're going to be here, I'd like to know in advance anyway. But if you're going to travel, I'll try to make this a little extra special for you. Hook you up with a little bit of swag or some training DVDs or something like that. I got some stuff laying around. I'd like to give it away. Who better than the people who are here training with us from out of town? It has to literally drive the extra mile to get here.
Everybody who drives that extra mile will get an 8x10 glossy color photo of Byron.
Yeah, that's on Gary. If you want to make that, that's fine. Send your complaints to Gary if he doesn't deliver, because I don't think he will. I'll sign it. I'll post for it. Gary, the rest of the ball is in your court on the rest of that one.
Another idiom.
Yep.
Another idiom. Hey, guys, you don't have to wait until June to train with Gary and Byron. If you're in the Wichita area, hit them up. They'd be glad to train with you. If you're in the Houston area, hit me up, and I'm south of there. I'd be glad to train with you. I'm in New Orleans area sometimes as well. So if you're around there, let us know. You should never travel without your jiu-jitsu gear, so keep it in your car. And if you're in the area, let us know.
I think we should talk about intelligent training. This week, we have an awesome article. It's basically 5 awesome low-effort ways to support your BJJ technique learning. The author is Chris Allen of Intelligent Training. And, our goal in jiu-jitsu, we always want to learn as much as possible. And we can be a slow learner like myself, or we can be a fast learner like Byron. Byron and I started at the same time. Byron's learning curve was much better than mine. And, who knows? It could have been because of intelligent learning. I think I'm probably a little more intelligent than Byron in a normal given circumstances, but Byron sure as heck is a lot more intelligent on the mat. And, we want to get better. We want to learn as much as possible. And a lot of times, just doing intelligent training is going to get us to that path faster.
Well, Gary, that's nice of you to say that I'm more intelligent on the mat. You're a smart guy, so I don't...
no, that was one thing that really got me when we first started training. I had started maybe a week or two before you, but you did get better quicker. That first year, there was a pronounced learning curve that you did better.
He trained 9 times a day.
Well, I was also...
His grip strength is incredible. But I really did think about that. I don't know how you learned so much better than I did right off the bat. If you're just more skilled than me, but it was one thing. And now that I've been in it longer, I do see there are ways to be better at learning. Stuff that I can do off the mat, ways to like Chris is showing in this article, ways to recall stuff better, ways to work your mind.
Yeah.
You know what I like best about this article is in the title, and that is 5 awesome low-effort ways to support your BJJ technique learning. And the truth is that if you're in college, you're finishing up your education, next year you're looking for a job, you're getting married, a few years after that you're having kids, career to look after. The fact of the matter is most of us don't have a whole lot of effort and energy left over at the end of the day, at the end of the week. And if we get in a couple, 3-4 classes a week, we're doing great. And anything we can do that requires relatively little effort is key, because I just don't have time. I don't have the energy to do the big things sometimes. And so I love the fact that these are easy things you can do to pay big dividends.
Yeah, that's the difference between you and Byron, Joe. You don't have time to do the big things. Byron does the big things.
The overall theme with this article is keeping a journal and writing some things down and making notes about your training. And one of the things that he talks about with the notes is spacing out your reviews. So this week I learned about arm bars, and here's the detail that really made the difference this time. Write that down in your journal, put the date on there, and put who taught it or who you trained with, whatever. And then get in the habit of, after a few weeks, it's now, in the future, by a couple of weeks, I'm writing down what I learned. We learned about neck cranks and how great they are and how Gary likes to get neck cranked. And now get in the habit of, thumb back 3 pages or thumb back, 3 weeks. Oh, arm bars. Oh, that detail. I had forgotten to work on this detail. And that sort of review really makes learning, I would say accelerated, but it's delayed by 3 weeks, but really helps your learning become more long-term as it gets in your brain a second time. Not the second time in one day, not in the 1 week, but over the course of some time. Now you'll be more likely to recall that sort of thing. Because how much jiu-jitsu do we learn and forget? For me, it's a lot. Most people can't retain everything they learn, but if you write down what the biggest detail or something like that of the night was, and then in a couple weeks read it again, man, that gives you a second chance to get that into your game. And if it's been going good for you, great. If you'd forgotten to use it, you get another try to remember it. And I think that's a great tool, and a great way to use your journaling is to thumb backwards a little bit. And what was I working on last week or 2 weeks ago? Man, what a powerful tool for your learning and development.
And then after that, you can take the things that you reviewed in your journal, and you can practice this technique of visualization. Sorry. You can take the things that you reviewed in your journal and then practice the technique of visualization. That's his point number 4, is to visualize techniques you learned in class, maybe the day after or the day after that. If you use public transportation to get to and from work, that'd be a great time to just kind of sit there and mentally review the techniques that were taught in class. Anytime you got a few spare minutes, you can do this. And that's what I like about this, that they're simple, they're easy, and you can fit them into your spare time.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, Joe. I've used visualization myself. The bad thing is neither of us can even say it the first time. It's so hard. But no, it really does help. But my favorite is number 3. Talk to yourself. Sounds a little strange. Talk to yourself. But this one has really helped me a lot. Describing the events, cements it into your memory. He's saying you can talk to yourself on the way home from class. You can, just as you're driving, I will talk to myself. Sounds weird, but it works great for me. And the other good one is describing the technique to a teammate. That one almost helps me even more, because sometimes the teammate won't get it. So I have to describe it different ways. And it also goes back to number 4, the visualization. I have to think about it too in my head, kind of what I saw, and try to explain it back. So, 3, talking to myself has really helped me become retain stuff and get better at techniques and concepts that I've been taught.
I think that describing it to a friend is crucial for like seminars and events you go to where you learn something from somebody that you're not likely to see again for, who knows when you're going to see them again. And so, yeah, if you can take that back to class and maybe if it's appropriate, ask the instructor if you can teach a technique or something and teach what you learned. And that's a great way to cement it.
Yeah, but just even showing them on the side of the mat after class, something that has a big value to it. You hear a lot of people say, yeah, my jiu-jitsu changed a lot, and I really got a deeper understanding of jiu-jitsu when I started to teach. So you go train all these, years and years, and then you start to teach, and it's like, this is different. And now I'm understanding the deeper side of jiu-jitsu. You could shortcut this by helping teach a few things, or just show something like what you learned at a seminar, or what you missed yesterday when you weren't here. Like, here's what we did yesterday. And you need to be appropriate with when you do this. You don't want to do this right when the instructor's showing something else. But if you can find a time, that's a great opportunity for you to kind of take a small teaching role and really help you understand at a deeper level, because they'll have questions. It won't work out perfect, and you'll need to kind of troubleshoot that. And it may not go great every time. You might need to grab the teacher and say, hey, what do we do? I'm missing this. Good review for you, too. And even just that, Gary's talking to himself in the car all the time. And
maybe that's why I get into the road rage incidents. They think I'm saying stuff to them.
Well, if you roll the windows up, you'd be better off.
Yeah, I guess that would help.
That would help. But his window's permanently stuck down.
Well, and when he pulls up next to the other car, he's like, hey, I'd like to talk to you about rear naked chokes. You got a minute?
Yeah, that doesn't work out too good. But definitely, this is an awesome article. Check out the article from Chris Allen of Intelligent Training. We have a link to it in the show notes. Just an incredible article. And so check it out and become more intelligent in ways to low-effort ways to support your learning. So you can't beat that.
Well, let's talk about a couple of reviews we've got. We got a couple of reviews last week, and we'll read a couple more. Maybe this will inspire some people to write reviews, and that really helps us out and helps promote the show. These are 2 5-star reviews. One of them said, this is from Prime Crane, I'm fairly new to the jiu-jitsu community, so it's a lot of content, and it's based on helping green jiu-jitsu practitioners. Very good. Thanks. A lot, and really we're helping everybody. That's what we're trying to. You heard part of the interview today Roy Harris was giving advice towards coaches and running the school and that sort of thing. So I think we cover the whole spectrum. We focus a lot on blue belts and below, and getting them, up to speed and up to where they're happy with their jiu-jitsu as far as getting kind of a baseline going, because that's a hard thing to do. It's part of a goal is for me to learn something every interview, and if that's happening, I think it's helping a lot of people too. But yeah, we're definitely honored to help anybody at jiu-jitsu, and we don't forget about people who are new and talk about super crazy advanced things. We talk about crazy stuff, but not just crazy advanced jiu-jitsu stuff. The other review was written by Liberty. It says, super helpful. As a newcomer to BJJ, this podcast has been great. You guys have really made me feel like it's okay to not be the strongest or fastest or most fit student. It's my job just to get on the mat, work hard, learn what I can, and have fun with the people while I'm training. Man, that is outstanding. Really like that review. And
that's a recipe for success in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Let's just have fun while training.
Yeah, and it's okay to not be, you know what, you're not going to be the strongest and best one on the mat when you're new, no matter what happens. Something's wrong if you are. If you're going to start hockey for the first time, you're not going to be good at hockey. Nobody expects you to be good at hockey. You're going to start jiu-jitsu. Nobody expects you to be good at jiu-jitsu. Just go in there and start learning and having fun. Thank you, Liberty, for the review. It means a lot.
Yeah, it definitely does. If you have any reviews, send them to BJJ Brick, or go on to iTunes, and put your reviews in there.
I want to remind people we have a lot of different things on social media. The biggest ones, though, will be YouTube and Facebook. And we have a podcast. It's pretty good. You should check it out. But Facebook, Joe has been really spearheading the Facebook initiative. He puts things on there several times a week. He'll put interesting ideas or pictures or anything he thinks that will be jiu-jitsu related that's makes you think or motivates you to train. That's awesome. And on our YouTube channel, we're reviewing all kinds of jiu-jitsu related products. You can also find the podcast on there in case for some reason you just want to play it in the background while you're doing something else. YouTube is an easy thing to do on your computer. Also have a BJJ Brick Q&A where you send a question to the email address bjjbrick@gmail.com, and a lot of times I'll answer it on YouTube for all to benefit from. Also want to thank our Patreon supporters. What Patreon is, it's a website for people who want to support people that produce content. Lots of people on this thing. So we produce an episode about every week, an extra one every month. And if you say, hey, this is great stuff, I want them to continue to do this and even make it bigger and better. What you could do is go to Patreon and pledge like $1 an episode. If this is worth $1, that's amazing. And you really don't understand how much this dollar actually helps in the long run, especially as the people on here add up, and they have literally saved the podcast once before, and they definitely have led to the growth of the podcast. And I want to thank, I'll just name a couple of them here, Mindy, Gudrun, Mark, David, and Brad. Man, you guys are outstanding with your support. It means a lot to us. Some of you guys are fairly new to the Patreon support. Some of you guys have been supporting us for a long time, and it just means a lot that you're doing that. If you want to sign up for the support group, if you want to sign up and help us out, we'll send you out a 5-inch BJJ Brick gi patch. You could wear in your gi if you like, and a sticker. You can put it anywhere you like. That's your property. And I'll invite you. Yes.
Tell me about this support group. Is this like, I'm Joe and I'm a jiu-jitsu-aholic?
We should start one of those. Or start one for our spouses. But also we have a private Facebook group. I forgot to mention this last week. It's kind of behind the scenes of the podcast. And occasionally I might get on there and say, hey, I'm interviewing Roy Harris. Anything you want me to ask him? And that's just a way to kind of get your foot in the door, or maybe get a question in the door or in the ear of somebody I'm interviewing, or Joe's interviewing, or whatever. A lot of times I'll say, hey, I'm thinking about this shirt design or making a logo change. What do you guys think? It's been really good for the podcast. I think the people that are on there are enjoying it. Here's the deal. If you want to join that, and it's for Patreon supporters. If you want to join it and you're a Patreon supporter, send me an email, bjjbrick@gmail.com, and send a link to your Facebook page, and I'll get the rest from there. And otherwise, it's kind of tricky to add people that I don't necessarily know to that group. Anyway, that wraps up Patreon. Thrilled you guys are supporting us on there, and always excited when we get another supporter. I had a great week on this episode. I'm thrilled to have Roy Harris back on the show, but always stay sweaty, my friends.
And don't forget to shower.
Train hard, train smart, get better. We'll see you on the mats, guys.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Thanks so much for checking out this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. Check us out next week. And don't forget to check out the archives at bjbrick.com or on this YouTube channel.